Welcome back to our TactileView training series. This time we're going to be talking about our pencil and eraser drawing tools on our toolbar. So the first one is our pencil tool, and these are just stacked on top of each other. You'll see that there's a pencil tool icon, looks kind of sort of like a green colored pencil, if you will. And below that you'll find our eraser. So we're starting with the pencil first. Of course, this is going to be used for our drawing. So when we click on it, just like with a lot of other tools in TactileView, there's going to be a little submenu that pops up with our options for this tool. So at the very top, we have kind of a slider scale bar kind of thing here, and you can choose the size of your pen or your pencil, whichever one you want to call it. I have mine about 5 pixels, which draws a little bold, a little bit of a bold line, I would say. I find this works pretty good for me for most kind of things, most of my kind of cleanup work, but you can make yours a little thicker or a little bit thinner if you needed to, up to whatever size you would like. Now, the only thing to kind of keep in mind is when you are drawing here, I'm drawing in print effectively, and truthfully, the size of it to a certain extent doesn't really matter. So what I mean by that is I just drew out a 5 pixel wide line. This is a somewhat bold line, right? If I scroll this guy down all the way to, we'll say, 1 pixel, and I also draw another line that's very thin, and then I'll jump it up to, maybe that's a little excessive there, but let me jump it up to we'll jump it up to a 20 point here, and I will draw yet another line. Okay, now I've drawn out 3 different thicknesses of line basically. Now I'm going to go look at my dot view, if you remember that from previous episodes, where we can look at the braille of this. Okay, now you'll notice my first 2 lines, both my 1 pixel and my 5 pixel, are both just 1 braille dot wide, right? So it doesn't really matter how thin I make my line. It could be paper thin. It's being embossed as braille dots, and a braille dot unfortunately is a fixed size and doesn't get any thinner, right? And so that 5 pixel, although it's thicker, it's not thicker than a braille dot wide, and so it was still also just 1 braille dot wide. And then I jumped up to that 20 pixel, excuse me, and that one turned out to be about 3 braille dots wide, right? And so there is kind of like a, even though visually on the screen in print it looks thicker, at a certain point, until it gets bigger or thicker, I should say, than 1 braille dot, it's still only going to be 1 braille dot. Or, you kind of have a bit of a range. I don't have that range exactly for you, like, it's not at, 8 pixels that all of a sudden it becomes 2 braille dots, or at 12 pixels it becomes 3 braille dots. Haven't done that exact math yet. But if you want to be my guest. But I just wanted to point it out because, to a certain extent, your line thickness when you're designing the print part anyway doesn't really matter, because you are really, at the end of the day, printing this out with braille dots on a braille printer. Well, actually, excuse me, I say that. It is possible to use this program with a thermoform machine as well, so maybe the thinner line would be more applicable in those kind of situations. But just kind of keep this in mind, or be aware of it as you're creating your graphics, because you might have done a thick line and just been kind of rocking and rolling with what you thought was a thick enough line, and then you go back and you look and you're like, oh, well, my thick line and my thin line have both been 1 braille dot wide. What the heck? I need there to be some distinction, right? So that's really all I'm pointing out for, is just make sure you're aware of that. So if you are trying to create distinction between a thicker and a thin line, you need to make sure your line is at least thick enough to be producing or showing as 2 braille dots, or whatever thickness you chose. So anyway, a little kind of item to keep in mind there. Going back to our pencil tool, we also have a few other options here. Namely, we have draw straight line, represented by just kind of a straight line on icon, and we also have a draw freehand, represented by kind of a squiggly line. And so these would let you draw straight lines from kind of point to point, or draw freehand, which is kind of wherever you click and drag your mouse. So I'll do the draw straight line first. I will click my mouse down, drag my mouse, and then release my click, and wherever I clicked and started to wherever I dragged and released, there will be a perfectly straight line from that point to that point. Going back to the freehand, clicking on that, I can just click and drag, and you will see that there is a line just drawn that just follows my mouse wherever I click and drag, and that's freehand erasing there. And below that, you will also notice there is a circular option or a square tip option for your drawing tool. So if you want to draw in that way, you can, just like so. And I just drew out a couple squares and a couple circles. And if maybe if you're trying to draw a box or something like that, or a rectangle, that kind of square drawing tip might be a little more applicable. And if you're trying to draw maybe a curved path or shape, maybe that kind of round dot would be a touch bit more applicable. So you can use, again, whichever one makes the most sense to you, and those are your drawing tool options for your pencil. Now jumping over to our eraser tool, you'll really notice that when you click on the eraser, kind of options wise, you actually have the exact same options, except for, of course, you are erasing instead of drawing. You can choose how thick your eraser is by pixels. You can make it very thin for detailed work or larger for cleaning up a whole bunch of stuff at once. You can also choose to erase in straight lines or freehand erase. You can also choose to use a circular or a square pointer tip. And some of these in different situations can actually be quite helpful. So maybe if you have like a graphic that you're trying to clean up and you're trying to clean up along a perfectly straight edge, well then this erase a straight path can be actually really wonderful. So like if I'm trying to erase something perfectly straight, this actually can be very helpful. I found this for like if I was trying to clean up the edges of something that was straight or squared off or something like that. This erase straight line feature is super helpful because it's really hard to be perfectly steady and draw a perfectly straight line with the freehand one. Yet, of course, again, when you're trying to erase something that's a curved path or something like that, then the freehand one is ideal for that. And those circular and square pointer tips for your eraser there can also be great for the type of cleanup work that you're doing. Again, like erasing into like a square or something like that, that squared pointer tip there can help you kind of get into squared corners, and that round pointer tip is a little easier when you're trying to kind of erase around something that's kind of curved or rounded. So they all kind of have their different uses, depending on your drawing situation, and it's really just kind of nice that you have all those features. Okay, well that wraps up our pencil tool and our eraser tool episode. We're going to jump on over to the next one. See you there.